random things too, services and weddings and whatever.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, we're on page 153, and we're in this Torah portion of Kedoshim, which has a sampling of many different types of mitzvahs, and here we get to mixing species. So in this, and we read it already, I believe the verse inside. I'm not sure, but at least we'll start. We'll do it again, and then we'll go down to the Hasidic insights. It says, you must observe my following rules. And the word for rules used here, they're translating as rules, is one of the three, generally three different words that are used to mean mitzvahs, commandments. They're either called mitzvahs in general sense, or mishpatim, or edis, or chukim. And he uses the word chok here, chukim. In this case, it's chukosai, my chukim. And chukim are rules, but in the distinction of the other two, they are rules that are seen as super rational. There's not a reason given for them. So you must observe my following rules. That's the introduction tells you that these are not going to be so easily understood are intuitive mitzvahs, like don't steal, or love your fellow. You must not crossbreed your livestock. You must not sow your field with a mixture of two or more species of grain or vegetables that grow together, or vegetables. You must not wear a garment or piece of felt made out of a mixture of wool and linen that has been pressed, woven, or twisted together. Separate pieces of raw wool and linen, however, may be worn at the same time as may separate garments of wool and linen. They can't be woven or manipulated into a becoming one garment, part of one garment. So these are three different types of mixtures. The Torah later on will also tell us not to that against cross-dressing, which is not brought up here, and it's not going to be in the discussion now, but one can certainly see that as within the same realm as don't mix if there are lanes and species within the world that God created. We want to work and cultivate and develop and even unite, but not blur the distinctions. And then there's also which can fall into this is meat and milk, keeping the separation between the distinction. Now, they're not all here. We bring three, the Torah brings three, the other two are not there. There are going to be distinctions between them, but in the general sense, at least one can take the perspective that they all are part of that idea of make sure to keep the distinctions clear. So now 19, the bottom, it says, you must observe my rules. So these statutes, these super rational, with the super rational flavor. This verse discusses three types of forbidden mixtures: crossbreeding animals, crossbreeding plants, and weaving wool and linen together in one garment. All right. Of these three, the first two are absolute. What does that mean? The Torah never permits them. They're forbidden. It's pork. It's forbidden. Period. This idea of crossbreeding livestock is forbidden. Crossbreeding plants is forbidden. Weaving wool, the latter is mandated in the priestly garments. Counterintuitively, in the garment of the priest, in the avnate, the sash or the belt, there the way the Torah describes it, it's to put the two together. So there it did happen, and it wasn't allowed to happen. It was there, and it's permitted in a garment bearing ritual tassels, tzitzis, as we're going to see later, much later in the Torah, from the way that the Torah talks about with the tzitzis and how it's framed, you see that shotness is suspended for that, and therefore, especially in the tzitzis of old, there was going to be at least one string or two strings, depending on the opinions, but with blue dye, and that was so that was a different string that could have been of linen, or if the whole tzitzis was the whole the body of the tzitzis of the talis and the tzitzis itself themselves are supposed to be of the same material. So we use them as all wool, but obviously there's cotton that do it, and so here this would be of linen. It could have been of linen. So in this case, there would be whatever it was. It could have been it would be permissible to have the other blue strings to be of a different type, whether it was wool or linen, the other type of what the main garment and tassels were. There's again, it doesn't bring up here wool, meat and milk, but there is at least a thought which that would be permitted in Jewish law, be permitted for use in the temple, only in the temple, not to eat, but to cook. This distinction may be understood in light of the differences between the two types of prohibitions. Prohibition against combining fibers seems illogical, since the two types of fibers did not merge to form a new type of fiber. If you're talking about creating a mule, I guess, which is you took two species and now you created a third. God creates species. Who has to create a new species? So there, even though we're allowed to use mules without a doubt, but the fact is the idea of actually doing it is a problem. Or to create a new species of I think a tangerine is a hybrid, maybe not. To create a new species. We said that's not for us to do, but you can see you're looking at something, and it is not that and not that. It's the product of that. So those are things we can understand. That's so God doesn't want us to do it. But when you are weaving together the wool and linen, or if I have a wool suit and they look in under the lapel and they find a linen there, you can say this is the linen, this is the wool, take it out. But you haven't created a new thing. It's not really blending fundamentally the two different species. You're joining them together in a way that can be disjoint. You can't do that with a mule. You can't do that with a tangerine, if those are in fact the correct examples. So they don't merge to form a new type of fiber. Even if they are woven and pressed together, it is possible to unravel them and undo the combination. Prohibition against crossbreeding, on the other hand, seems logical. God created many different species and commanded them to remain distinct. By tampering with them, we are disturbing the order of creation, bringing new, different hybrid entities into being. It does make sense that this can never be allowed. You can say, okay, the God says, I gave you the species, don't create new species. That makes sense. But what is the real, truly super rational one is the idea of the shotness. On the other hand, if you think about it this way, stand back and look at God's purpose in the world. Fusing two entities into a new one seems to be the ultimate reconciliation of opposites. The true peace achievement of the peace and unity that we're working for, that will characterize a messianic future. Why then does God insist on boundaries and integrity of species? See, how does Isaiah frame the idea of Mashiach's times? He says that the wolf shall lie with the lamb. It's the idea of where there are contradictory species. and it's not going to be contradictory anymore. There's unity. So this is the ultimate unity. Why isn't this a good thing? When we say at the end of Shmona Esrei of the Amida, it says Osa Shalom B'Mreima, that language that we use. It means that God makes peace in the heavens. Who's warring in the heavens? That God has to make peace. And the language of the Talmud is that there's the archangel Michael, who represents the idea of water, and archangel Gabriel, who represents the idea of fire. They stand. Water and fire are irreconcilable, but they stand before God. And each one stands in their own. One does not burn the other, dissipate the other. One does not extinguish the other, because for God they lose their individual characters and they submit to God. There's a beauty to that. So why is that a problem here? The answer is twofold. First of all, the peace and unity we aspire to is not the dissolution of everything's unique identity into a nondescript pool of homogeneity. Rather, the goal is for every created entity to retain its God-given identity and still function harmoniously with every other created entity, which has also retained its God-given identity. The idea of what the true ultimate of what we're looking for is that I've shared for you that there's, I'm sure you've heard this from me, because I know I've said it numerous times, that when I was in London, three powerful but very different personalities went from Chabad to the Lenin Library, because it opened up, because at the beginning of Glasnost, they were able to get access to the Chabad library there. And the Rebbe sent them, and they passed through London, and they were very different people, and they were very powerful personalities. And you wouldn't, HR would not have been wise to put them into a team together. They didn't seem likely to work well together, even though each one individually has. They're three leaders, all chiefs, and the Rebbe gave them. Each, as they left, they went to the Rebbe's door for a blessing, they told us, when they stopped off in yeshiva, and the Rebbe gave them a Hasidic discourse, which had just been printed, published, and it was the way they used to do it. It was like these 8.5 by 11. Well, this is exactly 8.5 by 11 papers, or 4, depending on the pages, and then they would just be stapled along the spine. And that was with little booklets we'd study. So he gave them not folded, but 3 each one. There was that specific Hasidic discourse was 3 8.5 by 11 pages, 2-sided, and he gave 1 page to one page to the next, and the third page to the third. And the Rebbe said that I'm not being cheap on paper. I want, in order to study this, you're each going to need the other. You not going to be able to do this on your own. If the implication is, in other words, the mission is, if your goal is to study the Mimer, to study the Hasidic discourse, then you can't do it on your own. You need the others. And for the mission, I want you to recognize that for this, you need each other and to be able to cooperate. So one can say, and I can totally understand, they say they since they were in the presence of someone who really they deeply respected, and they kind of lost themselves, so they were able to, it's just, this isn't about me, it's about the mission. And assume on the mission also, they were driven by the mission and not allowed their own personal their little idiosyncrasies to get in the way. But the goal, the true manifestation, is that that they can be who they are, not that they're lost. Standing in front of the Rebbe is a slice of time, but the true idea of Messianic era, as we speak about, is that the lamb is the lamb, and the wolf is the wolf, and they haven't. It's not because now they've lost who they are. They are who they are, but as they are who they are, they're able to find space for each other. And this is the idea of what he's saying. The goal is for every created entity to retain its God-given identity and still function harmoniously with every created entity, which also retained its God-given identity. This is the true manifestation of transcendent divinity, the paradoxical reconciliation of opposites as opposites. It's not that we lose our identity. It's that we have our identity, and together we're able to create oneness. It's not that we come to this country, the melting pot. That means we can't be a Jew or a Lahavdil or Italian or whatever it is. We are who we are, and we retain who we are. And as who we are, we look and partially because we have respect for something greater than us, which is the flag or whatever, however you want to put it. We're able to not lose who we are, but to recognize that who we are can cooperate and coexist and flourish together with people who are not like me. Second, the possibility of unity is a function of context. In the context of holiness, unity of opposites is possible and desirable because heightened awareness of God and gender selflessness. In the temple, there was heightened godliness. As I say, if you're standing before someone where there's a heightened awareness, and there's a sense of humility and there is a sense of awe for the presence of the person you're in. Like I said before, then in that context, unity of opposites is possible and desirable because heightened awareness of God engenders selflessness, and only if opposites are selfless can they blend harmoniously. So there has to be, it's not losing oneself, but it's losing one's ego. And that is so they remain with their strength and their, but the thing is, the power of the ambiance causes the ego to dissipate. Conversely, in the context of creation, which by definition is the realm of self-awareness and self-orientation, unity of opposites is not possible and therefore not healthy. Without that, outside the rarefied realm or episodes of being in front of a person of great stature or being in the temple of old, in real life, the reality is that there's self-awareness and self-orientation, and that's not really it's you got to be careful who you put together on the same team. You can't just say, well, listen, it's you and it's you, and go do the job. You have to be realistic. Maybe they're not going to be able to do it because they're just so different. Trying to blend them artificially will only lead to clashes and chaos. Therefore, it is only, this is on page 154, it is only the mixture of fibers that can possibly be allowed because they each retain their discrete entities, even when combined. But even so, their mixture is only allowed. So it's only, I'm sorry, only the mixture of fibers can be allowed because they each retain their discrete entities when combined. So that's what pointing out here is that in the temple where we say shatnez was allowed is because there was something they didn't each lose themselves in creating a third entity. Here, the wool is here, the linen is there. They're partners in the suit. You can undo the partnership. But even so, the mixture is only allowed in the environment of the temple where God's presence is openly revealed, or in the context of God's commandment to affix ritual tassels on four-cornered garments For in these two contexts, the forces they represent lose their self-assertion in the experience of God's presence, as we have seen previously. Outside of these contexts, however, the mixture is forbidden. In contrast, cross-breeding plants or animals is precisely the type of mixture that frustrates God's purpose in creation. Since the original species lose their unique identity in the formation of the new breed. They hear that God wants multiplicity to come together as one. You know, we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Echad means one. It should say the only. God is the only. To disabuse any possibility that there's someone besides God. So in one, you can have a composite one. That there's this, and they're all one. Or where there's one, there could be two. There could be number one, there could be number two. The idea is that God created a world of diversity and multiplicity, and that's exactly what God wanted. And then he wanted that multiplicity and diversity brought into a oneness. It is a composite one from our perspective. And it should be a composite one, because we recognize God as, yes, God is the only true existence, but we're bringing that awareness and recognize that everybody's part of that, and therefore our multiplicity, there's a unity that comes, but it's bringing oneness into the multiplicity, but not to destroy the multiplicity. So crossbreeding plants or animals is precisely the type of mixture that frustrates God's purpose in creation, since the original species lose their unique identity in the formation of the new breed. With such a mixture, the issue of context is irrelevant. Even in the temple, that wouldn't work. And therefore, there was no instance of crossbreeding permitted by the Torah. Okay. Now let's go back up to, let's not back up, let's go up to the top of 154, verse 20. This is an interesting, like the Torah sometimes gives us talk about something. Obviously, textbook only has textbook, and then you say a non-textbook situation. So you have a whole Talmud and Jewish law also thinking about interesting situations. Usually, the Torah is talking about more in principles and tells them through specific situations, but it's a situation which lends itself to being a general principle, a general rule. This one seems to be very, very specific. It's partially, we're told by our sages, that to give us insight that the idea of combining unlikely or different partners when it comes to plants or animals, it can also be when it comes to human beings. We have to be careful who we unite with, and even the confusion that can come from here. We're going to be talking here about a woman who's under has I guess that's called a bonded, a contract of bonded servitude. She's a servant, but to two partners, and one has given her a bill of freedom, the other one hasn't. So she's half and half. So it becomes a very, very odd situation, but of confusion of who are these people and who a person is. And that is meant to bring across the idea that we need clarity. And let's read it, and then we'll maybe talk a little bit more about it. As you have been taught, a Jewish bondman, which is this week's Torah portion, about a Jewish bondman. I think it's even though you're a safe crowd. It's generally translated as a slave. That is a wrong word to use, because slave has certain meanings and connotations in our country and in general. The Torah that does not permit that. This is a person who is destitute or has been ordered by the court. Well, probably destitute in either way. Either they have no money to take care of themselves, or they stole and they have no money to repay it, and so either they sold themselves, or the court said you have to work work off your debt. And there are a lot of very strong labor protections to make sure that this person is not abused, and it's actually seen as a very big burden in the language of the Talmud. A person who buys or acquires a bondman or woman has really acquired for themselves a master or mistress, because there's so many obligations as to what to have to take care of them. As you have been taught, a Jewish bondman who's already married to a Jewish woman is also allowed to also marry a non-Jewish bondwoman. That's this week's Torah portion. We've also been taught that a non-Jewish bondwoman may gain her freedom before the end of her term of service, either if someone pays for her release or if her Jewish master frees her himself, and that once she is freed, she assumes the status of a full Israelite woman, because unless she doesn't want to, but the idea is she's been living a Jewish life because she's in the house, and now this she'll go through conversion. Finally, you soon be taught that adultery, even if committed when a couple is only betrothed, is a capital crime. Okay, so this is all background. Now, so what's the case? You have a Jewish man conducts carnal relations with a woman. And who's this woman? This woman is a non-Jewish bondwoman who has been designated by betrothal for her master's Jewish bondman. So, and she has not yet been fully redeemed, since only part of the redemption money has been paid, nor has freedom been granted her by her master. So she's not here nor there. She's committed to someone, but she can't be fully committed to the person because she's not fully there. So she's in a state of limbo between certain types of identity, and this Jewish man certainly doesn't belong in that equation. There must be an investigation by the court to determine whether she is in fact fully free, for if she is, she and her paramour are liable to the death penalty, like an Israelite who commits adultery. Because if she's fully free, now she is a Jewess, and then there's this is real live adultery, even though they're only betrothed. But the betrothal in Jewish law is not like engagement, which to us is really, it's a commitment, but it's not it has no effect of marriage. Betrothal, in the way we call it, is it's actually the first part of the chuppah process. It used to be a year in between those two processes. Now we do them both under the chuppah. So then she's partially married. If it is determined that she's not fully free, then they must not be put to death, because she had not been completely freed. If she's not freed, she can't be married, and therefore a betrothal was not full betrothal. Nonetheless, she's punishable by lashes, and paramour must bring his guilt offering to God to the entrance of the meeting. Specifically, must bring a ram as a guilt offering. Priest must then effect atonement for him before God by means of the guilt offering for the sin that he intentionally committed. If he committed the sin unintentionally, for example, if he was not aware that the woman was betrothed, he will be forgiven by the same means of atonement for the sin that he committed unintentionally. Okay, so this is a very rare case, but say the Torah is trying to let us know that the complications that can come with confused identity. This is one of the things that Rabbi used to speak about. More than speak, he would speak in a high decibel level about what he felt about the need to have clarity when it comes to Jewish identity and conversions and so on. So everybody's created by God. Everybody's good. Everybody's God's children. We should not. We have to be careful not to confuse the identities. Okay. Fruit. Go to 23. When you enter the promised land and you plant there any tree that produces fruit that can be eaten as food, you must at first block its fruit from use. So the word for block is the same as the word for foreskin, arla, which it means, the idea is that there's an impediment. Its fruit must be blocked from your use for 3 years, which you must count from the time the tree was planted. The fruit produced by the tree during these 3 years must not be eaten even after these 3 years have passed. So there are, even though a tree is kosher, and if you pass an apple tree, and it's you can't steal from someone else's apple tree, but it's in the forest. It's if it's ownerless, it's kosher. You picked it off a tree. How could it not be kosher? But actually, in Israel, if you have to be certain that it's not from the first 3 years, because then it's not kosher, because the first 3 years you're not allowed to eat the fruits. So let's take a look at the Hasidic Insights of 23. It says, if you plant there any tree that produces fruit that can be eaten as food. The Medrash notes that God's first act after creating the world was to plant the Garden of Eden. And that this verse implies that the same is expected of the Jewish people upon arriving in the land of Israel. Agricultural planting was to be their first endeavor. So we want to mirror God. When it came to the Garden of Eden, God planted trees. When the Jews came to Israel, they started to plant. The importance given to planting stresses the centrality and fundamental psychological position of agriculture and civilization in general, as well as in spiritual life. Just as trees and plants constantly bear fruits, so too we may not act in a contextual vacuum. We must fulfill our divine mission in a manner that bears fruit, that affects ourselves and others in a lasting, meaningful way. Here's the metaphoric bearing fruits, meaning that we have an effect. And there's what we do is not just the act, but the act throws off consequences, good consequences. That's called bearing fruit. Now, for the next one, I think we need to read the verses. See how far we can get with this. We need to reread the verses 24 and 25. So let's move over to 155. In the fourth year, so at the first 3 years, the fruits are blocked. Fourth year, all its fruit produced that year will be holy, and that it must be either brought to the temple city and eaten there or redeemed monetarily. So there's one called Arla. The first 3 years of fruits you can eat. The fourth year, you can't. There are restrictions on how you eat. What do? You take money. You take them, and you go to Jerusalem to eat them, or it could be a lot to take. So what you do is you sell them, take the money, and with the money you go buy food to eat in Jerusalem. You go to Jerusalem, buy food there. In latter case, the money must be brought to the temple city and be used to purchase food that you must then consume there. The same way the second tithe must be treated. The second tithe has the same laws. The purpose of requiring you to visit the temple city is so that being there, you'll be inspired to offer praises to God. One of the things that the Torah wants Jerusalem as a center of our consciousness. The Torah wants us to be in Jerusalem and relatively frequently, even if it's the old days and you're living up in the Golan, so it's quite a trip. Come once a year, at least, to Jerusalem. And so, if it's possible, on one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, but if not, then I have to take care of my second tithe. Well, my second tithe wasn't every year, but the Arla, and so coming there is a spiritual retreat, and to be able to have food. So it's built in that you're going to have money, something to be able to go and enjoy yourself, even if you're not a wealthy person. You're a farmer, and you would take this money and save it up. Torah says, no, I want you to go enjoy yourself there, and you got to eat it all up. And so you'll be inspired to offer praises to God. In the 5th year, you may eat its fruit freely. Now you can eat it, but sell it, put it away, whatever. Its fruit is from then on subject only to the other rules applicable to produce. Since I know that you may resent having to care for the tree for 4 years without being allowed to eat its fruit either at all or freely, I therefore inform you that as a reward for observing these restrictions, the fruit of the subsequent years will be both exceptionally abundant and exceptionally satisfying. That's what God says. Postpone gratification. Work with me here, and you'll end up having the very good produce. Furthermore, whereas you must usually fulfill my commandments without regard to any reward you might earn thereby, in this case you may fulfill these commandments expressly in order that the tree increase its produce for you in its subsequent fruit-bearing years. Usually, you do a mitzvah for God, and if God blesses you, God blesses you, and you trust in a good and loving, fair God. Here, you're even allowed to have that intent. I am God, your God, who may be relied upon to fulfill my promise in this regard. Okay. So now let's go back to page 154 and try and get to the bottom of this. Its fruit must be blocked from your use for 3 years. All the Torah's commandments are aimed at rectifying the primordial sin. Adam and Eve. So everything. Adam and Eve brought confusion to the world, disruption to the world, the valuing our own impulses over divine intent and divine purpose. So every one of the mitzvahs is saying, no, it's not about what I want to do, it's about what God wants, and seeing the purpose in reality. So that goes for all mitzvahs. In the case of this commandment, the association is explicit. Here it's a straight up why. If we look at what the Talmud tells us, Adam, as we know, was created on Friday afternoon. That's not the Talmud, that's the Torah, and was immediately issued his first commandment not to eat from the tree of knowledge. So this is Friday afternoon, and it doesn't say Friday afternoon. The Talmud tells us Friday afternoon, but it says Friday, and issued his first commandment not to eat from the tree of knowledge. From the perspective of the Medrash, which both differs from and complements that of the contextual meaning of the text, this commandment was to remain in effect for only 3 hours until the Sabbath, at which time Adam was to use this fruit to sanctify the Sabbath. But the Talmud, here the Medrash, the Talmud goes through an hour by hour analysis of what happened with Adam's creation, of what went on, and what we see scripturally, and when it happened. And the idea was that the commandment was given to Adam 3 hours before sundown. So it really, I mean, they had very little time that they needed to exercise self-control. And what was the intent? That the fruit, which was not an apple, but there's debate what it was, but none of them had the opinion of apple. The Adam was to use this fruit to sanctify the Sabbath, so that using this fruit was saying, don't use it now from this tree of knowledge. Wait until Shabbos, and then you'll make kiddush. You'll be a new gift Shabbos, and that's when you will use this. Thus, from the perspective of the Medrash, the fruit was the grape rather than the fig, because there's an opinion that it was a fig. The grape means he would use the grapes, make wine, and make kiddush. That's what the Talmud and Medrash are telling us. And they didn't have the self-restraint for 3 hours. Unfortunately, Adam yielded to his impetuous desire to rectify reality on his terms rather than muster the modicum of patience, self-control that was asked to demonstrate. Using a heap. Here, this is already other and Chava together, and so the consummate human, and so, but it looked good. What was the problem? It says there that it looked luscious to the eyes. That's what the language of the verse, and that they didn't want to wait. Ate of the fruit before sundown, thereby precipitating the existential fall of reality. We're working to rectify this to this very day. In order to rectify his sin of refusing to wait for 3 hours, we were required to wait 3 years before we would partake of any tree fruit. The idea is that now it's a parallel, 3 and 3, and therefore we do this in order to rectify the 3 years of Arla for the 3 hours they didn't wait. By treating the 4th year fruit in a holy manner, eating it in the holy city of Jerusalem as an act of praise to God, we rectify the fact that Adam did not first taste the fruit as part of a sanctification of the Sabbath. So now you have the 3 years of waiting corresponding to the 3 hours of waiting. And then what did do the 4th year? What would have been the fourth hour? The 4th hour would have been celebration, enjoying Shabbos, enjoying the world, enjoying relationship with God. We do that, which they didn't do. We're not simulating. It didn't happen. We're simulating what the purpose was and what God's objective was, taking that 4th hour now in the 4th year to go enjoy ourselves in Jerusalem with the fruit. Okay. Whereas the fruit of the first 3 years is forbidden, and the fruit of the 4th year is holy, the fruit of the 5th year is simply mundane. Yet the Torah states that the purpose of the entire process is for the sake of the 5th year and beyond, so the tree increases its produce for you. So the 5th year is just regular your apples and peaches. Yet the way the Torah says is that this whole thing now you're going to have from the 5th on, you're going to have special produce. Shouldn't the goal, this seems like counterintuitive. Shouldn't the goal of this process be the holiness of the 4th year rather than the mundaneness of the 5th year and beyond? The Torah is bringing us to a crescendo, especially since it's a counterweight to what happened with Adam and Eve. So now we've waited the 3 years, and now we can do something, and we do something that they were not able to do because they got in their own way. And we are appreciating godliness in the physical world and going to Jerusalem to appreciate. That's the crescendo, period. And then you say, okay, so now, and then you go back to regular life. That's not the way the Torah says it. What the Torah is saying is that the 3rd, the 4th year, and then the 5th year on, you're going to have special produce. Like that's the step 1, step 2, and now we finally get to the goal of step 3. Why is that? The answer is that holiness per se is not the goal of life. The goal is to invest the mundane with holiness, for only thus can we make all aspects of life into God's home, thereby fulfilling the purpose of creation. It's a very important thing, and very, very Hasidic thing. That, yes, of course, connection with God is the goal of life. But the idea of living in a sacred environment, that's not the goal of life. The goal of life is to bring the sanctity into what we call life on the ground, the mundane. For only thus can we make all aspects of life into God's home, thereby fulfilling the purpose of creation. When we take the fruit of the 5th and following years, which is not intrinsically holy, and make use of it for holy purposes, as a reason and reminder to praise God for satisfying our needs and desires, we are accomplishing precisely that. This is especially true when we recognize that the bountiful blessings of the 5th year come to us as a direct result of our having heeded God's instructions regarding the fruit of the preceding 4 years. So it's really, it brings us home. In other words, is Shabbos the purpose, or is Sunday the purpose of creation? So they're both the purpose of creation, but the real purpose is to take Shabbos sanctity and infuse it in a Sunday. In the beginning of his career, this is an anecdote, very few people had ever heard of the Baal Shem Tov. He wandered anonymously from town to town in search of opportunities to help his brethren, both materially and spiritually. He would often ask the simple people whom he met about their health and finances. He knew that they would invariably answer with praises and thanks to God, and these words of praise were ever so precious in his eyes. In one town, there lived an elderly scholar who had totally disassociated himself from the pleasures of the flesh. For more than 50 years, he spent all his weekdays fasting in a secluded room, cloaked in his talis and tefillin, and constantly studying Torah and abstaining from any mundane conversation, only late at night with some bread and water across his lips, after which he would immediately return to his studies. Baal Shem Tov, who was dressed as a simple villager, visited this old sage and asked him about his health and needs. When the old man ignored his repeated inquiries, Baal Shem Tov loudly declared, "Why do you deprive God of his sustenance?" Noticing the scholar's shock at hearing such seemingly sacrilegious words, Baal Shem Tov explained, "We Jews are sustained for the beneficence that God grants us. What is God sustained by? To paraphrase the words of King David, and you, O Holy One, what are you sustained by? You sit upon, meaning you are sustained by, and you're supported by the praises of Israel. God derives satisfaction and sustenance from the thanks and praises offered by the Jewish people and gratitude for their physical well-being. The Talmud uses the language that God is weakened. Forbid. That is, God is weakened when we don't pay attention to him, when we don't thank him. Here it's saying, we're coming from the direction, but he's saying to this man, you don't make brachas. You don't see, you're studying everything, but the idea of recognizing God and thanking God for what you have and eating and partaking of the world and thanking God for the world, that sustains God. Why are you depriving God? The elder Torah scholar in the story was indeed serving God. Nevertheless, the Baal Shem Tov told him it's not enough. Although we do make limited use of the body and the human animal soul in studying the Torah, is mainly a way of manifesting our divine soul. Important as this may be, in order to elevate the body and the human soul, we have to engage the physical world and reveal God's presence in it. Thus, by limiting his focus only to categorically holy pursuits, refusing to thank God for simple physical kindnesses, the scholar in the story was missing the point. In the words of the sages, anyone who declares I have nothing in life but the study of the Torah doesn't even have that. So what is that? What does that Talmudic phrase mean? What do you mean? He has studied, the person studying Torah, and he says that's all I have. So see, he doesn't have enough. He's missing the boat. He doesn't even have Torah. Not have Torah, because Torah. The point is to tap into sanctity, draw sanctity, and infuse it in life. If you're not infusing it in life, then what are you doing? Where did you draw? What are you doing with the sanctity? Where are you drawing it to? The other side of the coin is that in order to properly elevate the fruit of the fifth year and beyond, we must first eat the fourth year fruit in an atmosphere of consummate holiness. It is specifically with the intense and unmitigated experience of union with God, divorced from any involvement with the mundane, that provides us with a heightened divine consciousness and spiritual strength to successfully engage the material world and transform it into holiness, rather than allowing it to drag us down into its materiality. This dynamic may be compared to the sage's prohibition against eating before morning prayers. We're not supposed to eat before davening. We, in fact, do have a coffee or a piece of cake or something, or banana, in order to pray with full concentration. We do that in order to pray, but it's all about the prayer. Until we renew our divine consciousness each morning through meditative prayer, communing with God without any thought of mundane distractions, we are not spiritually fit to elevate physical food. So without the spiritual heights of having the self-restraint of 3 years, then the fourth year of going and bringing that sense of the holy connectedness and going to Jerusalem, the pinnacle of holiness, and then infusing the human physical food experience. That's the only way we can then move on and have a fifth year, which is technically mundane but truly meaningful, because we've charged our batteries. We'll leave the rest till next week.
I have a question about the grape, as long as the grape came up.
Yeah.
Why the grape? Why were grapes given this honor, distinction? Why?
I don't know that, everything ultimately has a purpose in God's mind, is whether or not in divine wisdom. I mean, there are certainly advantages that we see to the grape, in the sense that it's on the intoxication level, that it helps us access deeper self, right? Because even in self-awareness, it's not so simple. Certainly not in expressing ourselves. And in the language of the Talmud, when wine goes in, secrets come out. But not only because you're a blabbing drunk, because it helps to loosen up, which is why we say l'chaim. And the very ideas of the crushing of the grape and bringing out its core. Is that the reason? It doesn't say that. We look at the grape and we see in it, definitely see a value. There's a special bracha on it, a special after bracha on it, and it's seen as being given significance in life. Humans see it as significant. I'm not a wine guy, but it's obviously a significant. Anytime you make a chuppah, a bris, whatever it is always with wine there. Kiddush, adala. Is it? These are it doesn't. Never where I've said that this is why God chose the grape. It may say that somewhere. I don't remember seeing it that way, but we know that that is significant to humans and significant to God, and it could be partially. I mean, although it's all tied together. God chose it. You can say subconsciously it's significant to humans because it's significant to God. And another level, it's because it's significant to humans. That's why God made it significant in Jewish practice, because it's something would look special to us. Imagine if I had a chuppah Saturday night. Imagine if I used seltzer. I mean, it probably doesn't have the same effect. So it's but I don't know that I've ever seen it directly that because of that's why God chose it. It might say that somewhere. I haven't seen it. I don't remember. At this stage, I can't tell you what I've seen and what I've not seen. I can tell you only what I remember right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess because I was wondering why,
Yeah, of course, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Okay,
Have a great week. Thank you.
Have a good week.